Hey everyone, so let's talk about the memento pattern. Now, the memento pattern is used to save the internal state of an object. And what that allows you to do is things like undo, redo, action, checkpoints, such as the ones you see on Google Docs, right? You can add text and then you can hit Ctrl Z or Ctrl Y and the text will restore, right? So Memento makes it easier to work with these types of scenarios. So it's really specific, but it is a cool pattern to learn. Anyway, when working with Memento, we normally have three initial concepts to talk about. The first one is the memento itself. So the memento itself is where you hold, or an opaque object where you hold or create the pieces of state where that you want to save and restore later. And then we have something called an originator. So the originator is what originates the mementos. So for example, on Google Docs, when you type in a text, that would generate pieces of mementos that you can restore or redo later, right? So the originator is that abstract concept where the mementos originate from. And we also have something called a caretaker. So the caretaker is mostly to decouple the mementos from the originator, at least in my opinion. The caretaker will take care of handling the history of the stack of the mementos and also redoing and doing the actions. So normally you can decouple also the caretaker from the originator, but in this case, let's receive the originator on the caretaker and then do everything from there. So for the example here, I want to kind of give you a blueprint for a text editor with undo and with a undo functionality. So for example, following this pattern, the only thing that will change, or the only entity that we'll have to rename, is the originator. Let's call it text editor. So it will follow the normal flow of a memento pattern, but we'll have, instead of calling the entity, the originator entity originator, we'll call it text editor. So yeah, let's open VS Code. Hey, so I have my VS Code open here, and let's start by creating the memento entity. So let's create a class called memento. We'll have a constructor, and inside of the constructor, we will receive the content or the piece of state that we want to store later. Then this dot content equals content, and let's create a getter, get content. We'll return the content itself, right? So return this dot content. Then we'll have the caretaker class, right? So the text editor class first, which will use the memento. So text editor, let's initialize a variable called this.content, which will hold the text, which will be an empty string. Let's create one called write. The write will receive a text, which will append into content. Then let's also create a save functionality, which will return a new memento with this dot content. So this will actually create the pieces of state that we want to save. So the flow will be basically like, we write the text that we want, then we save, then we can restore later, right? So it's a simple flow, but gives you the idea of how the memento works. Then let's have a restore, which will receive a memento. And what we want to check is if the memento is undefined or the memento exists. So this dot content will be equal to memento. If the memento actually exists and it's a valid object, let's just use the get content that we created on memento. If not, it will be an empty string, right? Because we can actually go back on the history of mementos where we'll not have a valid object anymore, right? Then we'll just have an empty string. So that's the idea. Then also let's create a get content, which will return this dot content. So we should be good here. We have the text editor and also the memento. Now for the final class, let's create the caretaker. Now the caretaker will receive the text editor as a parameter. So this dot text editor equals text editor, and also we need to create the history, right? So we can undo actions. So let's create this dot history equals an empty array. So let's also create a save. The save will actually push data into history, and we need to actually do something like this dot editor dot save, text editor dot save, which will create the memento, right? So we'll have inside of this array, history array, we'll have a list of mementos, right? So we can undo the actions. Let's also create the undo action, and the undo action will actually have to pop the last save piece that was saved. Then we'll have the last known states, which will be this dot history, the last item on the history array, so that will be this dot history dot length -1, and what we can do is this dot text editor dot restore, passing through the last known state, or we can pass an undefined item if we don't have the memento, right? Like the array doesn't has any more items. So we should be good here. Other than that, we can go ahead and create the instances that we need. So let's create a text editor instance, and also the caretaker. Caretaker equals new caretaker receiving the text editor. So what we can do is text editor dot write. Let's start by writing hello, or just hello and a comma. And what we can do is caretaker dot save. Then we have the first state, and we can actually print out text editor dot get content. So that should print out for us the hello, right, which is the first piece of state. We can also go ahead and add more text. So let's print out word, right, and save, and then console log again. So you can see that we have the full string. Let's add, just as an example, another piece of text. This is the memento parent, and then save, and then console log again. So you can see that it's bringing out everything that we need. And now let's do the undo parent, right? So let's say that we want to undo the last piece of text that we added. So we can go ahead and just call caretaker dot undo. Then if we console log the text editor dot content, you can see that it undid the last piece of state that we had. Then we can go ahead and do that again. You can see that it also undoes that, and we can go further and do that all whenever we want, right? All the times we want. So that's a very basic example for the memento parent of the memento parent. But you can see that you can fit that in different scenarios. You can do undo and redo actions. You can do a lot of stuff with the caretaker, right? And that decouples your logic, your memento logic, and makes it easier for you to work with these specific types of scenarios, right? Which are kind of rare, right? But it's cool to know how to implement that. So that's about it. I hope you have a good one, and that's it.